So, last week, we just got into the book of Luke, chapter 15. We're going to be there again this morning. This is, like I said, called the Great Lost and Found chapter of the Bible. There's three parables that Jesus gives here, back to back in Luke 15. And we had just covered the parable of the lost sheep last week. And the emphasis of that parable was seeking the lost. There's an emphasis of each of these parables. They're different. Last week it was seeking the lost. And there's a great joy and happiness when one finds something that is lost. When we find it, we have joy and happiness in that. I think one of our biggest misconceptions is that we only look at those who have not yet come to Jesus as being those that are lost. When in fact, there are many people who sit among us every week in our church and they're just as lost as those that haven't actually come to Jesus. We need to be better shepherds of our flock. And I think you heard me right when I said we need to be better shepherds of the flock. It's not me, it's not your pastor, it's not your deacons and your elders, it's us. We are all shepherds of our flock. What's your flock? Is this your flock? Is it your family? Is it your friends? Is it your network of people that you work with? I don't know where your flock is, but you have a responsibility when you step up and say, I'm a Christian. You take on that label as a shepherd, and you have a responsibility to God to be a good shepherd to those people. And so we have to work each and every day to do that. And so when one of the sheep in our flock, whatever that is lost, it's our responsibility to go get them. All right? And if we do our job and we're focused on those, we hope that nobody gets lost. But if they do, we must go find them and bring them back into the fold. So many times, we expect the preacher or the deacon or the leader of the church to go talk to these people, and that's not who they really want to hear from. They'll say that, well, you know, the preacher never even came and talked to me. Well, the preacher, when they show up and they knock on their door, they'll say, well, he's just doing his job as a preacher. When we, as people, just the common people of the congregation, walk up and show enough interest in somebody to say, I care about you, and I love you, and I'm concerned about you, that makes an impact 10 times more than any preacher walking up and knocking on their door. Amen. But we've become so comfortable in letting the preachers and the leaders of the church do that we forgot what our responsibility is. And so last week's parable is that we all have to go seek the lost. Now this week we're going to look at the lost coin and the lost son. Now let's begin with the lost coin, okay? The emphasis here is in the search for the coin. All right? So let's get into this. Luke chapter 15, 8 through 10. Jesus says, or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, will not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Okay, so there's several observations about this parable that to bring it to life, all right? First, the coin that this woman lost was a drachma. Now, a drachma is worth a day's wages, okay? So, the second thing we have to consider here is that the women generally did not work independently of the family business. It's not like today, where women have their own jobs and they earn their own money based on that. Okay, so this woman, it was either given to her by her husband or it was a part of her dowry. Okay? Now, Jeremiah, he suggests that her dowry may have been worn in a headdress for which one of the coins was lost. They wore this on their head for some reason. I don't know why. But the coin was clearly a precious resource to her and a large embarrassment to her if she lost it. It wasn't just losing the money, it was also her credibility and an embarrassment to her. So she lights a lamp to look for it. Now either her house doesn't have very many windows in it, or it's at night and she can't wait till morning to find this coin. All right? It's very, very important that she finds this. She has to find it now. It's the urgency. Besides, when you're living on dirt floors like they did, the longer something is lost, the more likely it is to stay that way. apply that to people, the longer they stay lost, the more likely they are to stay that way. It's going to be a lot harder to go get them when they've been in that condition for a long time. They're going to get very comfortable in that lostness, and they're going to accept that as their reality, and they're going to accept that as being normal. This woman knew that she had to find this coin right away. When we know that people in our congregations, within our flock and our friends, when they are lost, when we realize that they are lost, we have to go now. Don't wait for them to come to their senses. You've got to go now, and we have to bring them back. The urgency is there, and that's what that's what this woman knew. She knew the urgency. That's what Jesus is trying to point out here, is the urgency of this search. It's not about the value of the money, okay? It's about the urgency of the church. We do, the people, the intrinsic value of people is far greater than any money, amen? Amen. And their salvation is far worth more than anything we could ever hope for as far as monetary. So we have to do this, and it has to be very urgent. And so that's why she says she lights the lamp and she sweeps down. We also notice that in the Greek, this word for friends was feminine. All right? So he was talking about, we're not sure if she ever told her husband that she lost this coin, but she does tell her craft circle that meets on Wednesday. She did tell them, because that's who she was speaking to here. And so Jesus, he thus puts this lost and found story in terms that both men and women can understand. All right? So he puts this in a term, and he tells this parable, and he's trying to stress the urgency of seeking the lost. All right. So now we're going to move into the parable of the lost son. And the emphasis here is on restoration. Okay, so now we've had the seeking of the lost, and we've had the searching, and now we're having this restoration once we found that. Luke 15, verses 11 through 16. And then he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to be one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So Charles Dickens, he said of this parable that it is the finest short story ever written. All right? And this is the most famous parable of this trilogy, and it's the climax of this series. It's also the longest parable Jesus ever told, and it has 2 parts to it. Okay? The first is about the son who wanders, and the second is about the son who doesn't. And the first son gets lost abroad, but the second son gets lost at home. Okay? We got to pay attention to this. The second son is equally important because it brings us back to verses 1 and 2 in this chapter, where the Pharisees, who are the sons who did not wander away, complain about Jesus' socializing with the lost sons. So there's a very important impact on both the first son and the second son. So the story opens up with the younger son prematurely demanding his inheritance. All right? Now, the inheritance of a Jewish man was divided according to the number of sons he had, plus 1. All right? So if he had 3 sons, he would divide it into 4 parts. If he had 4 sons, he would divide it into 5 parts. All right? And so on, so on. I think you get the gist here. Now, the oldest son got the extra part called the double portion. Goes back to Deuteronomy 21:17. So this man had 2 sons. The estate was divided into 3 parts. 1/3 was to go to the younger son at the death of his father. All right? And until that time, he has absolutely no right to claim his inheritance. He has to wait until his father passes away. So in fact, to demand his inheritance early was like saying, drop dead, Dad. I want my stuff now. And so this impudent young buck is declaring that he can no longer live under his father's roof, and only by his father's graciousness does he receive anything. Okay? His dad didn't have to give him this now. He willingly did that. So we might also note that the father divides it between the two boys. The older son gets his share. He gets his share also, although perhaps only in promissory notes rather than in tangible coins like his brother. His 2/3 is coming to him. It's already been declared. Nonetheless, the fact that he already has received what is his makes his complaining at the end of this parable even more offensive. So many times we want to focus on the younger son and then lose focus on the older one. So the younger son, eager for his independence, travels far in search of greener pastures. And hard times hit on him, as we see. They hit especially hard for such a foolish fellow who squandered all of his resources. And now he's desperate. So he hires himself, which literally means to attach himself to a local hog farmer. And he thrusts himself into a citizen of that country who probably neither needed him nor wanted him. This guy didn't need this boy. He probably didn't want him, but he did him a favor and he gave him a job. Thus, he gave him the lowest job, and ultimately an odious job to the Jews, which was feeding pigs. It would be difficult to paint, that is for a Jew, a picture of deeper depravity than this. This was the lowest of lowest. All right, for the Jewish people. And just when it seems that things can't get any worse, they do for this boy. He gets so hungry that he's prepared to eat the carob pods, which belong to the pigs. Now, that doesn't sound, yeah, it's pig food. It doesn't sound real appealing, but until I studied this, these things, they weren't edible, but only as a last resort. You see, a diet of carob pods is mentioned in other Jewish literature as that of a direst need. Okay, the most extreme poverty. So they are shaped like a little pair of miniature horns, and thus they derive their name, Karishan, and meaning little horns. So I'm assuming these things were just disgustingly nasty, horrible things. And when you ate of these, you were also declaring that, okay, I am in the deepest part of poverty that I could ever be in. And this is where this young man was at. So when Jesus is telling this to his readers and to his audience, they understood what he meant by that when he said the pods that were fed to the pig. We don't quite get that. But this guy was as low as he could get. Let's continue with the story, 17 through 20. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will rise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him." So this whole sad situation slaps this boy back into reality, all right? And he came to his senses, it says. And this phrase indicates a return to sanity. All right, the young man wisely chooses to return home, and he would clearly be better off as a slave to his father than a slave to this pig farmer. He recognized that his dad treated his servants better than this pig farmer was treating him. And as he approaches the farm, the father sees him and runs to greet him. All right? What father here wouldn't go running after their kids? Well, in the Middle East, running was an act of indignity. So this has significance. When Jesus said he ran, his people understood that his father threw off all protocol for excitement of seeing his son. He didn't care what he looked like then. He was running after his son. He was going to go bring him back into the fold. And Jesus does not indicate whether the father was standing there watching, or if he was simply waiting and just happens to see him at the end of the lane, at the end of the driveway. What Jesus does say, however, is that the father takes the initiative in reconciliation. He throws himself on his son's neck with many kisses, ignoring the filth and the stench of the swine, the tattered clothes, and the empty pockets. When we go after somebody, do we put conditions on it? Are we going to be concerned about what they look like, where they've been, what they've been doing? Do we look at those things before we decide whether we're going to go help somebody or not? Whether we're going to go talk to somebody about, them coming back into the fold, or even coming into the fold for the first time? Are we going to put conditions on it? Man, that guy stinks. That person uses some pretty foul language. I saw that person at the bar every night this week. I'm not going to go talk to that person. Or are we going to forget about all that, and are we going to go throw ourselves on them and hug them and kiss them and love on them and tell them that they are worthy and that they are loved? So many times we want to put conditions on. This father didn't care what his son looked like. His father didn't care if he had empty pockets. His father didn't care if he was, naked and afraid. He went and embraced him and fell on him immediately and started lavishing with love and kisses. As Christians, we have to display that. We have to demonstrate love under all circumstances, under all conditions. Let's continue and see what Jesus continues to tell us about this parable. 21 through 24. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now, originally the son thought of becoming a servant in his father's house, right? He even has this whole speech memorized verbatim. If we go back to verses 18 and 19, he already knows what he's going to say to his father. He's already got his speech laid out. Okay? And so before he can even get half of his speech out, before he can even get his speech out, his father starts barking orders to the servants and lavishes on the boy the trappings of an honored son. He doesn't want to hear what his son has to say about what he did or what he was. Okay? That's not important, son. I don't care. You're here. You're back. And so he starts already preparing the celebration before his son can even apologize for what he did. Now the robe, the ring, and the sandals are more than signs of comfort here. Okay? They are signs of sonship and freedom. The robe was such as would be given to an honored guest. They kept special clothing there, so when people come to visit, they would throw that on them. The special robe was for an honored guest. The ring is a sign of authority. So when he puts the ring back on his son, he gives him that authority. And the sandals represent freedom, since slaves went around barefoot. So his father clearly restores him to this place of an honored son. And in short, he is alive again. Now this word for resurrection is an obvious allusion to the effects of sin. And the parable of this is seeds of the New Testament theology, being dead in sin and alive in Christ. If you want more on that, read Romans 6:4 and 6:9, 6:11, 7:4, 8, 10, and 11, Ephesians 2:5, and Colossians 2:13. It talks about being dead to sin and alive in Christ. And that's what this father did for his son. Okay, he restored him immediately. So let's finish up with this in Luke chapter 15, 25 through 32. This is the second half of the parable. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, he has devoured your property with prostitutes. You killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.
Amen.
So this brings the second part of the parable concerning the older brother. And this conclusion to the discourse brings us back to verses 1 and 2 again, where the Pharisees are upset because Jesus is spending time with publicans and sinners. All right? The older son doesn't feel like the father should be spending time with the younger son who did all these things to him. Now the older brother hears the music, and he hears of the dancing, and on his way in from the field, and he's obviously curious. So there's a surprise party for somebody, and perhaps he thinks it's for him. He doesn't know his brother's back. So when a servant says that his lost brother has come home, and he's the one being honored, he becomes angry and refuses to go into the party. So his little brother has demanded his inheritance. He has dishonored his father. He has squandered his estate, and he has shamed the family. So the older brother is justified both logically and legally in his anger. But the letter of the law does not always coincide with the spirit of the law. And he misses compassion and forgiveness, which far outweigh retribution. So his father goes out to the elder brother. All right? Now understand, for the second time that day, he goes out to retrieve a lost son. Not just the first son, but he goes out to meet the second son. So this is twice in the same day that he goes out to receive a lost son. But the elder brother, jealous of the party going on inside, is not yet ready to give up his own private pity party. Okay? His opening comment, "Look!" He says that. It sets the tone for this encounter. I can just see him pointing at his dad. "Look!" And he says, "This son of yours sticks out like a sore thumb." You know, he's mad at his dad. He's pointing that finger, and he's yelling. This son of yours, he denies that this son or this other boy was even his brother. He's not even acknowledging that he's part of the family. He's not willing to call this prodigal his own brother, and he also levels several accusations against the brother that he can't even know for sure are true. All right? If you go back and read it, for instance, the story never mentions the younger brother hiring prostitutes, but his older brother accused him of it. All right? So he's ticked. He doesn't want anything to do with this guy. But the father's response is very gentle and it's reasonable. The other brother has and will get his just reward. And that's not even the issue here. The primary issue is not justice, but it's gladness. And his brother was lost, but now he has been found. And again, we end this third parable with a note of great joy at finding that which is lost. The older brother, however, adds an interesting twist. Whatever happened to the older brother? We don't know. Did he or did he not enter the house with his father and begin rejoicing over his brother's return? Perhaps Jesus does not tell the story because the story has not yet ended. All right? Jesus stands in the middle of all the prodigals, the tax collectors and the sinners,